This week, we are joined by a guest who, to put it simply, helps companies impress their customers. He is Jon Picoult, the founder of Watermark Consulting and the author of the best-selling book, From Impressed to Obsessed, 12 Principles for Turning Customers and Employees into Lifelong Fans. Jon is a customer experience and leadership expert who has been featured by dozens of media outlets, including the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, NBC News, and Fortune, to name a few. And we've also had the pleasure of having him speak at Connections for the past couple of years. Jon has also advised C-suite executives at some of the world's foremost brands, helping companies capitalize on the power of loyalty, both in the marketplace and in the workplace. Jon has earned his bachelor's degree in cognitive science at Princeton and holds an MBA from Duke. So, Jon, welcome to Buffering.
Thank you, Zach. It's good to be here with you.
Great to have you.
Yeah, Jon, we're really excited to have you here and get into the conversation today. Just to kind of kick things off, we really wanted to get into, I would say, I guess the provocative way you introduce your book, and the opening line of your book, which I love so much, which says, if you're aspiring to satisfy your customers, then you are aspiring to mediocrity. And boy, that just absolutely hit me over the head like a ton of bricks, which I'm sure is what you were going for when you wrote it.
It had the intended effect then, yes.
Yes, it absolutely did. I love this perspective. And, Zach and I talk all the time about, how consumer expectations continue to really dramatically shift, as we go through different generations, and how their younger generations, much like Zach, just have a very different level of what satisfaction means. We'd love to hear your perspective and kind of your insight on going back to that, again, provocative statement. I'd love to just hear your perspective on all of that.
Yeah. So, to put it bluntly, a different way, I would say customer satisfaction is a one-way ticket to the business graveyard. And the reason that I say that is because study after study has shown that satisfied customers defect all the time. They just leave. So if you're really trying to derive competitive advantage from the customer experience you deliver, it's not enough to merely satisfy your customers. I would argue that you need to impress them. And I use that word impress very deliberately because this is very much about creating an indelible impression in the minds of the people that you're serving, because that's the impression that's going to cultivate the repurchase and the referral behavior that's really the lifeblood of any thriving business. And I think, you mentioned expectations. So I think it's also worth noting that what it takes to impress a customer, to make that kind of indelible impression, might surprise you. Because while you could argue that what customers expect, that sort of expectations have been ratcheted up over the years, what I would also say is that what customers anticipate has been ratcheted down. And, so there was a study my firm did a couple of years ago. We found that only 25% of consumers say that businesses consistently meet their expectations. Forget about impressing, right? Just meeting basic expectations consistently. And so the reason I point that out is because the bar is set pretty low. And so if you think about what it takes to impress a customer these days, it's not necessarily white glove service. Not that I'm knocking that. Like, that's a great thing if you can offer it. But sometimes just doing what you said you'll do can actually turn heads. Think of your own experience as a consumer. How often have you spoken to your BSP or your credit card company or your health insurer, and there's some complex issue, and so the service rep says, I got to research this, I'll call you back in a couple days. And what are you thinking in your head? I'm never going to hear from this person again. And indeed, that's 9 times out of 10 in my experience, that's how it bears out. And you just need to contact them again and retell your story to someone. So that's an important thing to understand, is that creating these impressions, given today's environment where the bar is set, it doesn't require over-the-top service necessarily. It requires nailing the basics consistently, exceptionally well.
That word you use there, I think, is really important. That consistently. That's the to me is that huge takeaway is you're right. You don't have to necessarily go completely over the top in every situation, but you need to be consistent in the way that you're communicating with your customers. Frankly, it's probably good advice just for life in general. I've found, just in the working world that there's a lot of people that will not follow up and do the things that they say they're going to do. And if you're a person who does actually have follow through, immediately you are seen as a positive contributor to the organization because you're somebody who can actually follow through. And obviously different scale when we're talking about customers, but just general good life advice there as well, Jon.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you're an employee of a company, you have lots of internal customers, colleagues,
Yes.
your boss and whatnot. And, just doing what you said you'll do is a great way to, propel your career forward. Because like you said,
Exactly.
It's rare that people do that consistently.
So in the broadband provider space, I think we have a unique opportunity here to create a very powerful customer experience because something very personal happens when you buy broadband. And it's not the checking out on the website, it's not calling, or that might be part of it, but you're inviting someone in most cases into your home to install service. In some cases, they may be modifying your home, putting a box, an ONT on the outside of your house and drilling through your walls. But regardless, this person's coming into your home, and I think it's a very important touch point. Again, it's personal. So you're inviting someone that you don't know into your space, and I think Gabe, you can back me up on this too. I think it's an underutilized touch point when we think of customer experience.
For sure. Yeah, I would certainly agree with that, Zach. We certainly see it as an underutilized touch point. Again, that install and repair technician, it's a very intimate thing where you're bringing somebody into your home to have this conversation with you, to do the install or to fix something that may be broken. Jon, I'd love to hear your perspective on how you see what I think, again, what we see as a really critical touch point, how you see it being leveraged to deliver an exceptional customer experience.
Yeah, so I think that you're absolutely right that the stakes are high at that interaction point because first, I am entering your home, right? I'm making modifications to your home. So there's a lot of risk, a lot of potential for anxiety and for customers to feel a little vulnerable. But also beyond that, it's a live interaction. And so there are a whole host of opportunities that are afforded by the fact that I am interacting with you live and in person, as opposed to over the phone or maybe through a website interaction, something like that. So I agree with you that there's a lot of opportunity. Here's the other reason why I think that the field technician touch point, why there's so much potential associated with it. And it actually has to do with the psychology behind great customer experiences, because we're subject, as human beings, we're subject to something known as the recency bias. What the recency bias refers to is the idea that the last thing that happens to us in an interaction exerts a disproportionate influence over our perceptions and memory of that interaction. Now, if you look at a field technician touch point, it usually comes at the end of a customer episode, right? Mm-hmm. If it's installation, it's coming at the end of the sales process. If it is a repair or troubleshooting, it's coming at the end of a problem submission of some kind. And so the notion of finishing strong, of really excelling at that final interaction point, is sort of a key tenet behind the cognitive science of good customer experience design. This is why a lawyer's closing argument is so important. This is why a fireworks display ends with an awe-inspiring finale. It's why a mediocre comedy tacks a blooper reel onto the end of the film. It's why a decadent dessert comes at the end of a meal. These are all ways that the experience is being shaped in a way that sculpts people's memories so that you end on this high note, and it helps to eclipse any negativity that might have occurred earlier in the episode. So this is the opportunity that exists with a field technician visit. It's the notion that I may have had to wait on the phone to try to schedule this appointment in a while. I may be angry that, my internet is out in the first place. But the bottom line is, if at the end, that technician interaction is just over the top, fantastic, stellar, it's actually going to help people to not remember all the negativity that came before. And instead, what they're going to focus on is the positive interaction that they had with that technician. Now, to achieve that, of course, you got to nail the basics, right? Just like we were talking about before, doing what you said you're going to do. So that means you got to have a competent, courteous, professional technician, shows up, knows the job they're going to have to do, and gets it done. But assuming that you nail those fundamentals, the other thing that I would encourage BSPs to think about is, how do you throw in sort of a pleasant surprise? Something that's a bit of a memory maker. And I'll give you an example from one of my former clients, which was a national BSP. And they did some customer research with customers who had a recent field technician visit. And they were shocked that over and over again, what customers mentioned was how the technicians, before entering their home, took the time to put these blue booty coverings over their work boots. And, the company was like shocked, like, this is what people are remembering about our field tech visits. But as long as the fundamentals are nailed, that the problem is getting fixed, that is a great example of how small details in the experience can actually create a very big impact on customer impressions. Because if I take the time to put a booty over my work boot before I come into your home, I'm sending a signal to you, a signal that I respect your home. I'm not trying to make more work for you by you having to clean up after me. And those are the kinds of little things, those little cues that people remember and they talk about, with others. So yeah, I agree. Field technician interaction, critical. And I think that you've got to nail the basics, but you also got to think about doing something a little bit unique, a little bit unexpected. So people come away with a, really cementing the memory of that interaction.
And it's funny because when I bought broadband here, this was the only touch point I had with my broadband provider. I checked out online. I didn't talk to anyone. I didn't know anything about them until they were in my home and I had that experience with them. Now, they didn't put the blue shoe covers on, but had they done that, that absolutely would have been the first thing I noticed is,
Yeah. And also, I think it's also worth noting that if you do that field technician visit really well, it helps to avoid problems downstream. So just think about installation. And if that technician views their job not just as getting the wiring right, but also educating that customer about how to use the new service that they have. If you invest time during the field technician visit to do that, I'll tell you what's going to happen. You're actually going to save money on the back end because you're going to have fewer customers that are calling technical support to say, I don't know how to use my remote, or I'm having trouble, figuring out this with my Wi-Fi. So that's another example of where the field technician touch point is so critical, is that it can actually pave the way for smooth sailing downstream through the rest of the experience. And that's not only going to be viewed positively by your customer, it's actually going to help you to deliver that experience at a lower cost because you're going to get fewer technical support calls as a result.
That's a great point. And I also, what Zach and I have seen is that when you go through reviews, Google reviews specifically of broadband service providers, a huge part of those reviews is, oh man, Zach came to my house and he did a phenomenal job with this install. I see so many Google reviews of broadband service providers where they call out the technician by name. They
it's
talk
shocking.
about that positive.
It really is.
I mean, what would you say, Zach? This is maybe, this is a little bit anecdotal, but 75, 80% of the time, I would say when we're looking at Google reviews for BSPs that we partner with, there's a call out of the install and repair technician. So not only is it helping deliver lower costs, John, and I totally agree with you long-term, it's also helping market because more positive Google reviews is better for SEO, all of those other things to help drive the cost of acquisition down.
Yeah. And, from a leadership standpoint, it's really important that leaders communicate with the technicians so the technicians understand the role that they are playing in forging those kinds of impressions. It's kind of creating a sense of purpose for that technician. The notion that at that moment when they enter your house, they are the brand. It doesn't matter what advertising, what marketing was done before. It doesn't matter what the website says or the sales materials. At that moment, the technician is the BSP's brand, and people's impressions of that BSP are going to rise and fall on that technician's shoulders. And that's a weighty responsibility, and it's one that technicians really need to take seriously.
Yeah, and I think this is maybe a shifting point from what we've seen in the past too, where it was the technician gets in the house, you install, and you get out of there as quickly as possible and go to the next job. I think we see that in a lot of industries as well. But now we're talking about how can we make this touch point or this engagement with the customer a lasting experience, a positive experience that maybe they go to Google or their neighbor and rave about and talk about this great
Right.
experience. But it's not so much a get in, get out. It's a make this a lasting experience for that new customer.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think back, Zach, to the conversation we had with John DeRocher a few weeks ago, where you had shared your experience of you ordered something on DoorDash, that thing was coming to your house, and when it was coming, they actually reached out and said, "Hey, do you have any Amazon packages that you need to return? If you want, we can pick those up for you while we're there." And I thought that was such a brilliant touch point to think about. Hey, we're going to this person's house already. How can we add that additional delight onto this? It's kind of a little thing, but it creates a really positive impression for in that case, DoorDash.
Yeah, no, that's a great example. When unexpected things, unexpected but pleasant things happen in an
Yes.
experience, it's just the way we form memories. The neurons fire in a certain way, and we remember that. And this, again, is a memory making exercise.
Mhm.
So people are remembering it, writing that Google review, telling their neighbors about it. That's what you want to achieve.
One of the other items we wanted to talk with you about was this idea of turning any customer experience touch point into a brand enhancer. And you have this idea of, some touch points, paying a bill or something like that seem like they can't be an opportunity to really lean in and impress people. We often see in the broadband service provider business that the only touch point a provider has with their customers on an ongoing basis is the monthly bill that they're sending them or the money they're taking out of their account every month. And Zach and I feel like that's a very dangerous place to be in if your only communication is taking money out of
A
somebody's account.
transaction or relationship. No,
Yes,
you don't want to
transactional.
have that.
Yep. But I loved your perspective, John, on how to think about, okay, I have this monthly touch point with my customers. How do you see an opportunity for people to insert a little bit of delight into a monthly bill, which seems a little wild to say?
Yeah. So, first, I would just reiterate what you said that, if your bill is indeed the most frequent, if not only, interaction that you have with your customers, that's something you want to think about and address,
Yeah, agreed.
and consider what are some other proactive ways that we can engage with our customers so that they see the value that we are bringing to them above and beyond when we're asking them for money. So
Mhm.
we'll put that to the side for a moment, but that is an important point. In terms of a bill itself, first, I think that I agree with what you're saying, that I would never advise any company to basically resign themselves to having a touch point that cannot be enhanced. I think that is very rare. You might need to think creatively, but there are always ways to move the needle on this. Now, going to a BSP bill, I'm going to go back to what I said earlier about remember where the expectations are set. Remember what people are anticipating when they get a bill and what they typically see from other businesses that they patronize. And what I mean by that is, it's not uncommon for people to receive customer statements and bills that are unintelligible, filled with jargon. They're ugly to look at. There are no sort of navigational signposts on it where you can quickly see, where's the information that's on here? What am I looking for? Where is it? And so, you might say, well, is this really a source of delight? I mean, I might not use the word delight, but I would say it's refreshing. It
Mm.
can be refreshing if you get a bill that is actually a joy to look through, that it is devoid of any industry jargon. So when I see line items on the bill, I actually know what you're referring to. It's not in some techno speak. If the bill is itemizing charges in a way that is meaningful to me, which probably means like not just lumping everything together, but actually itemizing the services that I'm expecting to see so that I know what I'm getting and what I'm paying for each of those services. Another one is, does it clearly highlight what changed from my prior bill? particularly in the case of BSPs and, services like that, where you expect sort of some consistency in your monthly charges. One of the most common things that a customer thinks of when they get their bill is, why is this different than last month? And so do you make it easy for people? Do you spike out on the bill what exactly has changed? So at a glance, I can look at that and say, oh yeah, I ordered some on-demand movies, and now I understand why my bill's, $20 more than it was last month. I think also the other way to create a bill that is distinctive is to think, how can we have that bill really highlight the value that we delivered to the customer during that period? So that it doesn't just become this is how much it costs, pay us please. But, maybe in the case of BSPs, maybe what you put on the bill is sort of a recounting of your last month. It's almost like Spotify, Wrapped, but at the end of every month. What did I get from you? What were the average speeds that I experienced on my broadband connection? What are all the cable channels? How many cable channels did I have access to? What on-demand movies did I enjoy? How many hours was my home protected by the security function that I get through your equipment? These are all examples of things that I'm deriving value from. Why not underscore them in a statement like a bill so that I'm not forgetting about all the value? And then, the other thing I would say about the bill is, how easy is it to pay it? Is the only way I can pay the bill to like write a check and send it through the mail? I hope not, because a lot of people are used to something very different. Is it easy to pay by setting up, say, on an auto pay? Can I just train my camera on a QR code on the bill and pay just like that? Also, is it easy to find customer service contact information? Are you one of those companies that deliberately hides your contact information in the hope that you will reduce call volumes or something, which is a losing proposition? It doesn't work. All you end up doing is getting the same amount of calls, but angrier customers. So these are all examples of things that I think can take a bill from sort of a dry administrative document to something that is more refreshing and distinctive and helps reinforce a positive feeling that people have about your brand.
I love the point you made there about adding value to that bill of your prior month's services, because this is what my BSP does. Every week I get a notification on my phone, and then I get an email following that as well, talking about how many intrusions, web threats, and I block ads on my network. That's the marketer in me, and how many ads have been blocked. And I get that every week. So I'm reminded constantly of, oh, this is the service I'm paying for. And of course, I set up auto pay months ago when I purchased my fiber. So I mentioned, I hope the bill is being paid, because that's the only touch point I've had with my broadband provider is that auto pay. But it's funny because I think of the ease of payment as well. You mentioned writing checks. Who's writing checks? But even
Definitely
some
not
of the
Zach.
yeah,
Zach
I wrote my
is not
second
writing
check
checks.
of my life this past week. But one of the other, I think I got Gabe hooked on Apple Pay too now. So
hooked on Apple Pay.
yeah, it's just those experiences like that. I did one last week, and I haven't told you about this one, Gabe. But if you've ever done pay with Venmo, that entire experience is fantastic. If you already have Venmo on your phone, I was on my laptop. I clicked it because I wanted to test it out, and a little QR code came up. I scanned it with the Venmo app, and I was done. It was such a seamless experience. I think of, we talked with John DeRocher about the sign in with Apple, right? These one-click touch points you have with companies where that experience is just so seamless. You walk away with that, and of course, Gabe, I told you about it. We told John about it, but you start referring to it to other people. So I'm all about making memorable touch points from things like that may not sound huge, but again, as the user, I can't imagine living without them.
Yeah. And I think the key thing for BSPs to recognize is that there are no administrative touch points, right? It's so easy to lapse into this view that our bill is just an administrative document. Why does it need to look pretty? Why do we need to invest in it? But as you both said, it's commonly the most, the only touch point that I might have with my BSP. And even if it's not, it is a prominent one. It's every month. It's right in front of my face. And so I think that's a key takeaway, is that there are no administrative touch points, and every interaction is an opportunity to reinforce your brand and elevate people's impression of your firm.
When we talk about the bill and that experience, I keep thinking back to there's a YouTube video of when the iPhone came out in 2007. I don't know if you've seen this, but the original iPhone bills from the companies that were providing service to them would be like books themselves. They'd have like every megabyte on as a line item, and I just keep thinking back to that. If I had that touch point in 2025, I would be a very concerned consumer. But that's going back to 2007 with the iPhone launch. Another thing here, Jon, in your book, you talk a little bit about how customer experience is an exercise in memory shape. And I'd love to pick your brain on that a little bit and also understand what are the implications for a business and how they engage with customers with this memory shaping exercise.
Yeah. So, you heard me use the term memory sculpting a little earlier. And, I think that this is just central to good customer experience design. The companies that do this well recognize that they're not just in the business of shaping people's experiences, they're in the business of shaping their memories. And indeed, I would argue that how people remember their experience with your company is even more important than the experience itself. And let me, explain why I say that. Imagine you're a BSP and, say I'm the customer and my neighbor approaches me one day and says, "Oh, Jon, I remember you telling me that you use XYZ for your broadband services. I'm in the market for a new provider. What do you think of XYZ?" Well, the next thing that's going to come out of my mouth in response to that question is not going to be based on the experience I had with XYZ broadband. It's going to be based on what I remember about that experience. And the way our brains are wired, those two things can actually be quite different. Because you see, we don't remember our experiences like a streaming video. It's not like we remember every frame in the interaction, and then there's some algorithm in our head that determines whether or not, we're satisfied based on the proportion of favorable frames versus unfavorable. That's not how it works. Rather than remembering things as a streaming video, what we remember about our experiences are the peaks in it, the high points, the valleys, the low points, and as I said earlier, the last part of the interaction. And so the implication that this has for how companies go about engineering their customer experience, is pretty significant. For one thing, it means you don't have to be perfect at every touch point. You can actually make a strategic, conscious choice to just be okay, just, meh, at a particular interaction, hopefully one that's not critically important to your customer. But you could still really thrive despite doing that if you make sure that elsewhere in the experience, you are creating more and higher peaks and also reducing the number and depth of any valleys that exist and finishing on a high note. And so, that's kind of the consequence of this whole memory shaping idea is that you don't have to be perfect. You just need to manage the peaks, the valleys, and the endpoints. And you need to do things that really garner the attention of your customer, because that's the only way we form memories is when we're paying attention. So if you're just on autopilot, not going to form any memories. But when you start to encounter things that are unusual, whether it's you actually called me back when you said you were going to, whether you were the DoorDash driver saying, "Would you like us to pick up any Amazon packages to deliver, to submit for you?" These unexpected things, that sort of draws the attention of your brain. And that's when those memories start to form. And the memory shaping is critical because, like I said earlier, that's how people decide whether I'm going to continue doing business with you or whether I'm going to refer someone else to you. It's based on what I remember about the encounter.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a great point. And I think the psychology aspect of this is really important because you're right. We think our customers think about us a lot more than they actually do. But the reality is they're out living their lives. They're taking care of their families. They're doing all of these other things. That's why I loved your comment about removing a lot of the technical jargon. That was a conversation that Zach and I had recently on the podcast as well. We think about all of this stuff a heck of a lot more than our customers do. And we need to take a step back and consider what are those critical touch points? How can we insert ourselves into those? And how can we make it just more understandable so that people do create those lasting memories? I think those are such great points.
Yep.
So I know we've covered a lot of stuff today. I'd love to hear your perspective on where you suggest businesses start when it comes to improving customer experience, or any advice you'd have to give to our listeners of, again, just kind of where to kick off this journey? Because I feel like it's so much and it's so big that sometimes people can get paralyzed of like, I don't know where to start. And so they just don't do anything.
Yeah, so I think that in the BSP business, a good place to start is around the notion of an effortless experience. You mentioned the ease of paying with Venmo, for example. Uh, you know, uh, the ease of scheduling an appointment with a technician, the ease of actually buying the service in the first place. And the reason I draw, your audience's focus to that is no offense to the BSP business, okay? But it's the kind of business where people don't wake up in the morning and say, I cannot wait to call my broadband provider. I am so excited to contact
Unless you were Gabe
like,
this morning.
Yes, this is true.
It's just the nature of the beast. And it's not taking anything away from the business. It's still a very valuable business that can enrich people's lives. But it's one where the notion of ease and effortless interaction, people place a lot of value on that when it comes to working with a BSP. So I think that's good hunting ground for people initially, is looking, where are we saddling our customers with unnecessary, avoidable effort? And how can we start to chip away at that so that we make it increasingly effortless for them to buy from us, to request assistance from us, to continue doing business with us? And, mechanically, one way I would suggest to start sort of peeling that onion is actually something that fosters engagement, not just with your customers, but with your employees as well. Because you could argue, well, I will argue that your frontline employees are probably the most knowledgeable about the things that disappoint customers and delight customers, the pain points that frustrate and annoy them. And so my suggestion to any BSP would be engage your front line. Go out and ask them and say, what are the top 3 things that frustrate and annoy our customers? Tell me about them. And then once you start to see thematically where, all the arrows are pointing, start to deal with those problems, start to remove those pain points. What is elegant about that approach is that not only does it help improve the customer experience, it also helps to improve the employee experience, because employees then see that they're not just another cog in the wheel, that they are a valued partner in helping to differentiate this business and turn customers into raving fans. And so, that I think is the beauty of that approach, is that it kind of kills 2 birds with 1 stone. You're addressing the employee audience and engaging them, and using the intelligence they provide, you're then addressing and better engaging the customer audience. So that would be my suggestion. Go out to your teams and say, what are the top 3 things that are frustrating our customers today? And then let that be your roadmap for where you improve.
Yeah, I think that's a great call. I'd actually say it's killing 3 birds with 1 stone, because it's both of it's the things that you just said. And also, when you go back to those employees to ask them to make changes in the day-to-day activities that they're having with your customers, if they've been involved in that process, and they're going to be obviously be much more bought in and much more supportive of making those changes.
Right. They feel ownership now.
Exactly. They have ownership over that and feel like they actually contributed to the solution versus just, somebody coming down from on high and saying, this was a problem and we need to fix it.
Right. Also, the next time you ask them, they will be that much more inclined to share their ideas with you, because they see that when they speak up, action is then taken. Surefire way to get employees to clam up is to ask them for ideas on how to improve, and then don't do anything with the information. You don't want to end up there.
Goes back to what we were talking about before. Actually say what you're, do what you right. do what you said you were going to do, and be consistent about it. So yes, good life advice for all kinds of different touch points here. Well, Jon, this was awesome. We really appreciate the time and the dialogue. I know you're starting to work with some Calix customers. I know we've got some things that you're going to be doing with some of the folks that we work with. If people do want to learn a little bit more, where can people go to learn more? Obviously, the book From Impressed to Obsessed is certainly a great place to start. But any other ways that they can get in contact with you if they want to have these conversations?
Yep. So the easiest way is to go to my website, which is jonpicoult.com. That's JONPICOULT.com. From there, you can get to my company's website, Watermark Consulting. You can get to the book's official website. You can get to my speaker website. So yeah, that would be the place to go.
Okay, awesome.
All right. Well, thank you, Jon, for joining us today. And thank you, everyone, for tuning into this episode of Buffering. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to give us a follow on your favorite podcast app and to share it with your friends and colleagues. And for more insights from Gabe, Jon, and I, be sure to connect with us on LinkedIn or visit Jon's website.
Thanks, guys. It was great to be with you.